In the previous video, we looked at some of the reasons that October and November are important watch periods in 2019. In this video, we'll look at yet another reason this time period may be very significant. This ties into the completion of a 7-year period that started in 2012. Several major Bible prophecies were fulfilled in 2012, not only in that year, but specifically between August to October of that year. The first fulfillment was of Daniel 12:11, the setting up of the idol of terror, exactly 1290 days after the position was taken oath by the man called Messiah. For a complete explanation of this Daniel 12 fulfillment, watch the video linked here. The second fulfillment in 2012 was of Daniel 12:12, 1335 days until the day the blessed were longing for, the Feast of Trumpets in 2012. This fulfillment is also explained in detail in the video linked in the upper right corner. Both of these fulfillments of the 1290 and 1335 days in 2012 are secondary fulfillments. The complete fulfillment of the 1290 years occurred from 606 BC to 685 CE, and the 1335 years from 685 CE to 2020 may also be a fulfillment of the blessed day. But that doesn't change the fact that another fulfillment of Daniel 12 also did occur in August and September 2012, calling attention to the One World Trade Center in New York City. This is the idol of terror that stands in the seat of the beast. But possibly the most important Bible fulfillments that happened in the fall of 2012 were the two signs described in Revelation 12. People don't believe this because it sounds so fantastic. Daniel 12 and Revelation 12 fulfilled in 2012. And it does sound fantastic because it is. And these fulfillments did happen. See the full explanation of the Revelation 12 signs in the video linked here. In short, the sign of the dragon was the Draconid meteor shower that occurred October 7th. And the sign of the woman was the Virgo alignment that happened a week later on October 16th. That alignment is rare. It won't happen again for another 500 years. And the same alignment happened in 686 while the abomination of desolation was being set up in Jerusalem. So 3 major fulfillments occurred in the fall of 2012, all 3 listed in the 12th chapters of Daniel and Revelation. But there was also a 4th partial fulfillment that occurred in October 2012, and that was a partial fulfillment of the flood prophecy in Genesis 7. The first clue is in Genesis 7:6. It says Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. So we'll put that here. The flood was on the earth when Noah was 600 years old. But notice verse 11 specifically says that Noah was in his 600th year. In his 600th year, the flood came. So he hadn't completed 600 years yet. He was still in the 600th year. This means that the flood occurred sometime between the end of Noah's 599th year and the end of Noah's 600th year. Now let's look at the next clue in Genesis 5:30. It says Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years, and then Lamech died at age 777. So we'll put that here. There were 595 years from Noah's birth to the death of Lamech, and Lamech was 777 years old when he died. This means there were 4 years from the death of Lamech to the start of Noah's 600th year, and 5 years from Lamech's death to the end of Noah's 600th year. So the flood occurred between 4 and 5 years after Lamech's death at 777. In New York City on September 29, 2008, the stock market crashed 777 points. The date of this event, September 29, 2008, was the Feast of Trumpets on the standard Jewish calendar that year. So we can think of this event as Lamech's death, the 777. Then 4 years later, on October 29, 2012, Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, flooding the streets and subways, causing what MTA called the worst disaster in the history of the New York City subway system. So, in the seat of the beast, on the edge of the Sea of Babylon, where we're told the asteroid will hit, there was a warning fulfillment of the flood prophecy. In other words, this fulfillment seems to have been a warning about the asteroid impact. But there's more. The sign of Revelation 12 that occurred 2 weeks before this flood happened on the ancient Feast of Trumpets, which is literally a warning about the asteroid impact. A sign is a warning in the Bible, and the 7 trumpets describe an asteroid impact, which is evident in Revelation 8, 10, and 11, and Revelation 9, 1, and 2. So the sign on trumpets is a warning about the trumpets, in other words, a warning about the asteroid. Also, the second sign in Revelation 12 is the dragon casting the stars to the earth, which also represents the asteroid impact. So again, the 2 signs of Revelation 12 occurring on Trumpets 2012 were a warning about a coming asteroid. And that warning occurred 2 weeks before another warning, the fulfillment of the flood 4 years after the 777. And both the 777 and the flood 4 years later occurred in New York City, the seat of the beast, which the prophecy tells us will suffer deeply from the asteroid impact, which will hit the Sea of Babylon, the Atlantic Ocean. And there's more. These warning signs occurred in the midst of a very important 7-year period. A significant fulfillment of Daniel 9 had occurred in 2009. The man called Messiah rose onto the world stage 62 Shavuots after the decree was put forth to restore Jerusalem. And on that year of the 62nd Shavuot, he won the Peace Prize for confirming the worldwide peace treaty of the beast. Not only that, the announcement of his award of the Peace Prize occurred on the date of the Draconid meteor shower that year. That event, the confirming of the covenant, started a 7-year period that ended in November 2016 when the prince that shall come was elected. And in the midst of that first 7 years, the warnings occurred. Were they warnings about the real event that will happen in the midst of the next 7-year period? The only event that has not yet occurred in Daniel 9 is the flood and the desolations of the city in the midst of the week. Now look at this. In Genesis 7:4, it says, "For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain." The rain, as we've discussed before, is the rain of fire and brimstone. It's the asteroid impact. The flood is caused by the asteroid hitting the sea, as explained in Revelation 18:21. Then in Genesis 7:6, it says Noah was 600 years old, and a few verses after that, it says Noah was in his 600th year. In other words, once the 600th year starts, it will be yet another 7 days until the rain comes. Days can represent years in the Bible, as is evident in Ezekiel 4:6 and Numbers 14:34. So this can be a code that when the 600th year starts, it will be 7 more years until the asteroid. If the 600th year started in 2012, as seems to be the case by the fulfillment, then 7 years later lands in 2019. And look at this. The actual sign or warning occurred on Ancient Trumpets 2012. So the 7 years from that will end on Ancient Trumpets 2019. The date in 2012 was October 15th through 18th, and the date in 2019 is October 27th through the 29th. Now look at the date of the flood in 2012, October 29th. The completion of the 7 days on Ancient Trumpets 2019 occurs on the same date of the flood warning fulfillment in 2012. And there's more. Also notice this is occurring in the midst of the final week. The recent Daniel timeline fulfillments create a window that ends in 2025. That means the week we're in now has to be the final week. And the end of the 7-year period of the warning sign ends precisely in the middle of that final week. I'm not saying the asteroid impact will occur on the actual date of trumpets. The point is that these alignments cannot be a coincidence. It truly looks like the warnings we have had for 7 years since 2012 are coming to fruition. Also notice the words in Daniel 9 translated in the King James Version as sacrifice and oblation also mean thanksgiving and gift. Does this refer to Thanksgiving and Christmas? I don't know. It can also mean Passover and tribute. But Thanksgiving will occur right after Ancient Tabernacles ends this year. I feel all of this is warnings upon warnings, but the actual date we can't know, as Jesus said again and again. It's a wake-up call, though, that this event must be coming soon, which means the escape from the serpent is also coming very soon. And there's just one more thing I want to point out. Notice this little scripture in Psalm 21:12. Therefore shall you make them turn their back when you shall make ready your arrows upon your strings against the face of them. Which year did the world turn its back on prophecy? We all know it, 2012. Most won't even hear that major Bible prophecy was fulfilled in 2012 because when they hear the words 2012, their ears close. The alleged non-event of 2012 caused them to close their ears, shut their eyes, and turn their backs. Precisely what the prophecy says. And again in verse 12. For more information on the other recent fulfillments of Bible prophecy, see the playlist linked here. And for more on why 2019 and 2020 are so important, see the video linked here. Thank you to those who helped make this work possible. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please consider providing support using the link below or at indigoflower.net. I hope you're doing well, and I'll talk to you next week.